August 28th, 1944. A muddy track somewhere in the collapsing pocket of Falaise, France. The world has been reduced to the smell of cordite, wet earth, and the cloying sweetness of apple orchards shattered by artillery. For 20-year-old Ilse Richter, a signals auxiliary in the Wehrmacht, the war is no longer a grand map in a command tent. It is the tremor in the ground beneath her boots, the whine of a fighter bomber she never sees, and the hollow look in the eyes of the men around her. For 6 days, they have been running, not a strategic withdrawal, but a panicked, stumbling flight from a firestorm of steel. Her uniform, once a source of pride, is now a tattered, mud-caked shroud. Her fingers, trained to deftly handle the delicate plugs and wires of a telephone switchboard, are stiff with cold and raw from gripping the side of a lurching Opel Blitz truck. The sound that finally ends it is not a bomb or a shell, but the grinding of gears as the truck ahead of them slews into a ditch. Then another sound, a language she has only heard in propaganda films, clipped and strangely casual, English. A voice cuts through the dripping rain. "All right, out of the trucks. Raus, Hände hoch." The words are an electric shock. Heads snap up. The exhausted soldiers of the 7th Army, boys and old men who had been promised a final glorious stand, simply stare. The fight has bled out of them, leaving only a gray, empty fatigue. A grizzled Oberleutnant, his face a mask of weary resignation, is the first to raise his hands. One by one, like a wave of silent capitulation, the others follow. Ilse's arms feel impossibly heavy. She lifts them into the damp air, her heart a cold stone in her chest. They emerge into the gray light, the Americans. They are not the gaunt, degenerate figures from the newsreels. They are impossibly tall, their uniforms a strange olive drab that seems to soak up the gloom of the French countryside. They chew gum, their jaws working methodically, their eyes scanning the ragged line of Germans with a detached professionalism that is somehow more terrifying than open hatred. A young GI, his helmet pushed back on his head, approaches Ilse. He cannot be much older than she is. He gestures with his M1 rifle. "Come." The word is a gentle prod, not a shout. She stumbles forward, joining a growing column of gray-clad prisoners. The Americans move with an unnerving efficiency, disarming the men, patting them down, their hands firm and impersonal. They collect the rifles, the pistols, the bayonets, and toss them into a pile with a careless clatter that echoes the death of an army. Ilse is herded with a handful of other women, nurses, administrative clerks, a few other signals operators, into a separate group. They huddle together, a small island of femininity in a sea of defeated men. She catches the eyes of the male prisoners. There is no camaraderie left, only a shared, bottomless despair. Some look away, ashamed. Others stare with an unnerving blankness. The air thickens with unspoken questions. What happens now? The rumors had been horrific. Stories of Siberian camps, of revenge-fueled atrocities. Every shadow seems to hold a new threat. They are loaded onto the back of a canvas-topped GMC truck. The engine roars to life, and the truck lurches forward. Ilse grabs a wooden slat to steady herself. Through a gap in the canvas, she watches the fields of Normandy slide by, a landscape of death and defeat. The men they leave behind, the Americans, are already moving on, their faces impassive, their war continuing. For Ilse Richter, the war is over, but a new, terrifying uncertainty has just begun. She is no longer a soldier of the Reich. She is a prisoner, a number, a piece of human wreckage being hauled into the unknown. The journey ends at a place that has no name, just a designation on a military map. A temporary prisoner of war enclosure near Atici, north of Paris. It is less a camp and more a wound in the earth, a sprawling city of mud and misery contained by coils of barbed wire. As Ilse and the other women are ordered off the truck, the scale of the defeat becomes overwhelming. Thousands upon thousands of German soldiers are packed into vast pens, a sea of gray uniforms turning brown with filth. The air is thick with the stench of unwashed bodies, overflowing latrines, and damp wool. A constant, low murmur hangs over the camp, the sound of 10,000 men talking, coughing, and groaning in a symphony of despair. The sky is a leaden sheet, promising more rain. The ground is a treacherous soup of mud that sucks at their boots with every step. American military police, identifiable by the white stripes on their helmets, patrol the perimeter. They walk with a measured, heavy-footed gait, their shotguns held at a casual port arms. They are guards, overseers of this vast human warehouse. To Ilsa, they are still the faceless enemy, the architects of this humiliation. Their orders, shouted in English, are incomprehensible, but their intent is clear from the prodding gestures and the stern set of their jaws. Move. Wait. Move again. She and the other women, perhaps 30 of them in total, are shoved through a gate into a larger enclosure. It is a mixed pen. They are not separated from the men. This is a transit camp, a processing station, and the logistics of segregation have been overwhelmed by the sheer number of captives flooding in from the front. Immediately, they are a spectacle. Hundreds of male prisoners turn to stare. In the ordered world of the Wehrmacht, the Helferinnen, the female auxiliaries, were comrades, protected by rank and protocol. Here, in the great leveling field of defeat, they are something else. They are women. A novelty, a reminder of a world that no longer exists. The stares are a physical weight. They are hungry, appraising, stripped of respect. Ilsa feels a cold dread snake up her spine. She pulls her thin jacket tighter around herself as if it could make her invisible. She recognizes the insignia on the men around her. Hair infantry, Luftwaffe ground crews, even a few men with the chilling death's head on their collars from a Waffen-SS Panzer division, their arrogance curdled into a sullen resentment. The discipline that had held their army together is gone, dissolved in the mud of this French field. They are assigned a corner of a large leaking canvas tent, already crowded with men who make little effort to give them space. The air inside is suffocating, thick with the smell of sweat and fear. As dusk bleeds into a cold, damp night, the atmosphere grows more menacing. The low murmur of the camp changes its character. Laughter, harsh and guttural, erupts from the darkness. Whispers slither through the tent. The women huddle together, their backs against a pile of damp supplies, trying to create a small, defensible space. But there is no defense. They are surrounded. A former Luftwaffe sergeant, a man with a scarred face and empty eyes, stumbles near their corner, reeking of scavenged schnapps. He grins, revealing broken teeth. "What have we here?" he slurs in German. "Little birds fallen from the nest." Another man laughs. They are not talking to soldiers anymore. They are talking to prey. Ilsa looks toward the tent flap, searching for the silhouette of an American guard, but sees only more shadows, more defeated men, whose last vestiges of honor are being washed away by the relentless, cold rain. The darkness inside the tent is nearly absolute, broken only by the faint, distant glow of a single generator-powered floodlight somewhere out in the mud. The rain has intensified, drumming a frantic, endless rhythm on the canvas roof, isolating them in their fear. Every sound inside the tent is amplified. The wet coughs, the muttering of men lost in fever dreams, and the closer, more deliberate sounds of movement. The Luftwaffe sergeant and his friends have not gone away. They are a knot of predatory shadows just beyond the small circle of women. Their whispers are no longer whispers. They are coarse, ugly suggestions, detailed and mocking. They speak of what is owed to them, soldiers of the Reich after all they have suffered. They speak of the women as if they are objects, battlefield salvage to be claimed. An older nurse named Clara, a woman with a stern face that has crumpled into fear, speaks in a hushed, trembling voice. "Ignore them. Turn your backs. They are just trying to frighten us." But Ilsa knows it is more than that. She can feel the pressure building, the sense of an invisible line about to be crossed. This is not the army she served. These are not the men she relayed orders for. Defeat has unleashed something primal and hideous. The thin veneer of civilization has been stripped away, and underneath is a raw, brutal opportunism. She presses herself against the woman next to her, a young clerk whose name she doesn't even know. They are shivering, but not just from the cold. The first move is sudden. A hand snakes out of the darkness and grabs the clerk's arm. She cries out, a sharp, terrified sound that is instantly swallowed by the noise of the rain. The sergeant and two others move in, their shapes blocking out the faint light from the tent flap. "Be quiet, little songbird," the sergeant hisses, his breath foul. "No one can hear you. No one cares." Panic erupts. The women scramble back, but there is nowhere to go. They are pinned against the damp canvas wall of the tent. Another man grabs Clara. She struggles, striking out with her fists, but he is too strong. He laughs, a cruel, breathless sound. Ilsa is frozen for a heartbeat, her mind screaming. This cannot be happening. Not here, not by their own men. The propaganda had warned them of the Americans, the Soviets, the French partisans. It had never warned them about this. A scream finally cuts through the din, raw and desperate. It is Ilsa's. It is a sound of pure terror, a final, hopeless appeal to a world that seems to have forgotten them. The sergeant turns on her, his face a grimace of rage in the gloom. "I told you to be quiet." He lunges, and Ilsa throws her arms up to shield her face. In that instant, a brilliant, blinding beam of light floods the tent. It slices through the darkness, pinning the attackers in its glare. They freeze like startled animals, blinking in the sudden, harsh elimination. A voice, hard as stone and amplified by the night, barks a command in English. What the hell is going on in here? The voice is followed by the unmistakable, terrifyingly loud sound of a pump-action shotgun being racked. A heavy, metallic shuck-shuck that promises immediate, devastating violence. Silhouetted in the tent opening are two figures, broad-shouldered and solid, American MPs. The sergeant, caught with his hand raised to strike Ilsa, slowly turns his head toward the light, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. Staff Sergeant Frank Kowalski of the 793rd Military Police Battalion did not want to be here. He wanted to be back in Chicago, drinking a cold beer and listening to the Cubs on the radio. Instead, he was standing in a river of French mud, responsible for a sea of men he'd been fighting a month ago. He was tired, his feet were wet, and his patience had been worn down to a nub. The scream from Tent 12 had cut through his exhaustion like a knife. He and Corporal Miller had moved fast, their boots sinking in the muck, flashlight held tight against the stock of the Ithaca 37 shotgun. Now, its beam held 3 German soldiers frozen in a tableau of imminent assault. Kowalski didn't need to speak German to understand what he was seeing. He'd seen it before in the gutters of his own city. It was the universal language of predators and prey. "Get your damn hands off her," Kowalski growled, stepping into the tent. Miller flanked him, his M1 Garand held at the ready. The Luftwaffe sergeant sneered, his fear momentarily replaced by a defiant arrogance. "This is not your concern, Ami," he said in heavily accented English. "This is a German matter." Kowalski took another step forward, the muzzle of the shotgun never wavering. He was a big man, built like the steelworker he used to be, and his presence filled the small, tense space. "You're in my camp. You're my prisoner. Everything in here is my concern," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Now back the hell off, all of you." For a long moment, no one moved. The air crackled. It was a contest of wills in the heart of the squalid tent. The German's eyes darted from the shotgun to Kowalski's face, searching for a weakness and finding none. With a muttered curse, he let go of the woman he was holding and took a stumbling step back. His 2 companions followed suit, melting back into the shadows of the tent. Kowalski kept the light on them until they were gone. Then he lowered the beam, letting it play over the small group of terrified women huddled against the canvas. Their faces were pale, streaked with dirt and tears. He could see the violent trembling in their hands. His own anger softened into a weary sort of pity. They were just kids, most of them, caught on the wrong side of a stupid war. He turned to Ilsa, who was still staring at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and utter confusion. He fumbled for the few German words he knew, the ones they taught for processing prisoners. It felt inadequate. He gave up and switched back to his own language, softening his tone. "It's over," he said, gesturing with his free hand. "They won't be back." He saw the lack of comprehension in their eyes. He tried again, speaking slowly, as if to a child. "You are safe. Now." He pointed to himself, then to Miller. "We will protect you. Verstehen?" He didn't wait for an answer. He turned to Miller. "Get on the horn to the captain. Tell him we have to segregate the females right now. I don't care if he has to build a new pen himself. This ain't happening again on my watch." Miller nodded and disappeared into the rain. For the next hour, under Kowalski's watchful eye, a new reality took shape. A section of the camp was hastily cordoned off with a new roll of barbed wire. An empty supply truck was parked to create a solid barrier. It wasn't much, but it was a separate space, their space. As the MPs escorted the women across the muddy ground to their new protected enclosure, Ilsa watched Sergeant Kowalski. He was the enemy, the conqueror, the monster from the posters. Yet he had just stood between her and a horror she couldn't bear to name, a horror that came from her own people. He hadn't shouted at them, hadn't mocked them. He had simply, and with grim efficiency, protected them. As she passed through the new wire gate, she looked back at the main compound, at the thousands of defeated men. For the first time, she realized the source of her fear had completely, inexplicably changed. The sun rose the next morning on a world that was the same, yet entirely different. The sky was still a pale, washed-out gray. The mud was just as deep, the air just as cold. But from inside the small, newly created women's enclosure, the camp looked fundamentally altered. The constant, menacing hum from the main compound now seemed distant, muffled by the thin strands of barbed wire that separated them. It was a fragile barrier, but it was a barrier nonetheless. An American guard stood at the gate, not with his back to them, but facing outward, watching the men's compound. He wasn't watching them, he was guarding them. A corporal with a tired face brought them a canister of hot coffee. It was weak and bitter, nothing like the real coffee they remembered, but it was hot. He handed Ilsa a tin cup, and their fingers brushed. He didn't look at her with contempt or desire, just a sort of shared human weariness. He nodded curtly and moved on. Ilsa wrapped her cold hands around the warm metal. She watched the other women. They were sipping the coffee in silence, their faces drawn and exhausted, but the frantic terror of the night before was gone. In its place was a quiet, profound bewilderment. They exchanged glances, small, questioning looks that spoke volumes. Everything they had been told, everything they had believed about the enemy, had been turned upside down in the space of a few terrifying minutes. The enemy was supposed to be brutal, degenerate, a godless force of destruction. Their own soldiers, the men they had served alongside, were meant to be their protectors, comrades in a shared noble cause. But last night, in the dark, the roles had reversed with a sickening clarity. The German men, freed from the constraints of military order, had become a mob. The American MPs, the faceless jailers, had become their guardians. Ilsa thought of Sergeant Kowalski's face, illuminated by the flashlight. It wasn't the face of a monster. It was the face of a tired man doing an ugly job, a man who had seen something he considered wrong and had, without hesitation, stopped it. His words echoed in her mind, not the broken German, but the simple English phrase she had somehow understood through tone and context alone. "You're safe now." For months, safety had been a bunker during an artillery barrage, the drone of friendly aircraft overhead, the sight of a German uniform. Now, safety was a coil of American barbed wire and a shotgun held by a man from Chicago. The realization was a slow, creeping dawn in her mind, illuminating the ruins of her entire worldview. The war had not just been a conflict of nations, of tanks and planes. It had been a conflict of ideas, a grand narrative of good versus evil, of heroism versus barbarism, that had been fed to her for years. And in one night, in a muddy field in France, that narrative had collapsed. She looked across the wire at the thousands of men in their gray uniforms. They were no longer just her defeated countrymen. They were a potential threat. She looked at the American guard at the gate. He was no longer just the enemy. He was her protector. The future was a terrifying void. She had no home to return to, no army to serve, no cause to believe in. But as she drank the last of the bitter coffee, Ilse Richter felt something she had not felt since the retreat began. The faintest, most fragile flicker of security. It was a strange and deeply unsettling peace, born from the moment her enemy had saved her from her friends.